Memphis had always been home. Its red brick streets, the gentle hum of the Mississippi in the distance, and the smell of magnolia in the spring, all of it carried memories my mother had spent decades collecting. And among all those memories, one place held the most: the attic. The attic wasn't big, but it was packed floor to ceiling with boxes labeled in her careful, looping handwriting: Christmas decorations, 1982, Mom's sewing, Dad's letters, old photo albums. It wasn't just storage. It was a shrine of our family history. I'd spent hours up there as a child, climbing the wooden ladder with my sneakers squeaking, blowing the dust off boxes, and discovering treasures from a past that felt like magic. When my daughter, Sophie, moved back home after college, I welcomed her warmly. I thought she'd enjoy the attic too, maybe explore and reminisce. But something about her always hinted at impatience. She was ambitious, restless, a whirlwind of ideas and energy, and I loved that about her. Or so I thought. It started subtly. One afternoon, I noticed she'd moved a few boxes near the ladder, stacked them haphazardly in the corner. I asked her about it. "Oh, Mom, I'm just trying to organize things," she said with a bright smile. "We can actually make this space usable if we just clean it up a little." I nodded, trusting her instinct. But cleaning it up, it turned out, meant something else entirely. A week later, she announced she wanted to renovate the attic. "We can turn it into a study space, Mom," she said. "A little reading nook, maybe a small office. You'll love it." I hesitated. The attic wasn't broken. It wasn't dusty or unsafe. It was sacred. But I didn't want to stifle her creativity. I said okay. I should have known that okay would cost me more than I ever imagined. On the first day of the renovation, I stayed in the kitchen, listening to the sounds of hammers and saws, thinking she was just rearranging a few shelves. It was only when I walked upstairs an hour later that my heart sank. Boxes were gone. Just gone. Some were neatly stacked in the hallway, but others. I could see the telltale black trash bags filled to the brim. I recognized my mother's handwriting on some of the boxes' flaps. My sewing patterns, Dad's letters, old Christmas ornaments, gone. I froze. Sophie turned around, smiling as if she'd just done me a favor. "Mom. Look at this. We're almost done. Isn't it amazing how open and airy it feels?" I wanted to scream. Instead, I whispered, "What did you do with the boxes?" She shrugged. "Oh, some of them were just old stuff. I didn't think we needed them." My heart tightened. "Some of them?" "Sophie, these are memories. Our family history. You can't just throw them away." She laughed nervously, brushing off my anger. "Mom, it's just stuff. We can digitize some of it, maybe take pictures. The rest, honestly, it was taking up space." I stared at her, disbelief written all over my face. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, had no idea what she'd just done. No idea that she'd crossed a line that shouldn't be crossed. Over the next few days, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she had thrown away some items by mistake. Maybe there was hope that some treasures survived. I began searching through trash bins behind the house, calling the city's waste management, even asking neighbors if they'd seen anything discarded. But the boxes, the memories, seemed gone forever. And yet, a nagging feeling told me that Sophie hadn't acted out of mere thoughtlessness. Something in her expression when she threw out those boxes, a slight smile, a flicker of satisfaction, made me suspect there was more to this than a simple renovation. The first night after the disaster, I sat alone in the empty attic, the wood floors echoing under my weight. I ran my fingers over the bare shelves, the ghost of what used to be. My heart ached, and for the first time in decades, I felt a rage so sharp it made my hands tremble. That's when I decided, I couldn't just let this go. Not my mother's letters. Not her ornaments. Not the stories of Christmas mornings, backyard birthdays, and quiet afternoons spent learning how to sew. I had to find out why Sophie did this, and more importantly, I had to make her understand the weight of what she'd done. Little did I know, the attic was only the beginning. The truth behind Sophie's move-out mandate was darker than I could ever imagine. And when I finally discovered it, it wasn't just anger I felt, it was a shock so deep, it changed everything about our family forever. The day after discovering the trash bags, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the attic, empty shelves, discarded boxes, the memories that were gone in minutes. I kept asking myself, how could Sophie do this? Was it really just a renovation? I decided to confront her gently, hoping for honesty. Sophie, I said, holding back my trembling hands, I need to know, did you go through all the boxes? Her smile wavered, and for a moment, I saw hesitation in her eyes. But she shrugged. Mom, I told you, I just cleared out stuff we didn't need. Nothing important. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But instinct screamed otherwise. A few days later, while Sophie was at work, I went through the attic again. One box had been hidden behind the ladder, a dusty, old trunk I had forgotten about. The lock was broken, and inside were letters tied with ribbon, a few antique ornaments, and photographs, treasures she thought she could ignore. But there was more. Under the trunk, I found receipts crumpled in the corner. At first, I thought they were random, but one caught my eye. It was from a local charity thrift store, with a familiar handwriting. My stomach dropped. I called the number on the receipt and, after a pause, a woman answered. Yes, ma'am. Did someone donate several boxes last week? I asked cautiously. Yes, she said. A young woman. Said she was clearing out her mom's attic. She donated old family things. Some of them seemed valuable. It's a shame. I froze. Valuable? Family treasures? When Sophie came home that evening, I decided I needed answers. I couldn't hold back anymore. Sophie, I said firmly, what did you do with the other boxes? The ones you didn't throw out? She hesitated, biting her lip. Mom. I didn't just throw them away. I gave some away. I thought it would be easier than keeping them all. I didn't think it mattered. It mattered. I snapped. Those were our memories. My mother's letters, our Christmas ornaments, everything we've ever saved. Sophie's face turned red, her voice defensive. Mom, I was just trying to help. You're making a big deal out of nothing. But it wasn't nothing. And the more I looked at her, the more I realized this wasn't just about being careless. There was a pattern in her actions, the hurried movements, the secretive donations, the way she smiled when she thought I wouldn't notice. That night, I stayed up digging deeper. I called the thrift store, checked donation logs, and even went through her room, looking for clues. That's when I found her journal. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to put it back. But curiosity, and a gnawing need for the truth, won. I opened it. Inside, she had written about me, about the attic, the boxes, the renovation. And what I read made my blood run cold. Mom is so old-fashioned. She doesn't understand modern life. These boxes are useless. I'll clean the attic, make space, and she'll never know. She's too old to notice anyway. Every word cut like a knife. Not just carelessness, deliberate deception. She had intentionally destroyed and given away pieces of our family history. She had done it quietly, with calculated thought. I sank to the floor, clutching the journal, my chest tight with betrayal. My own daughter, my flesh and blood, had crossed a line I thought was unbreakable. And then I realized, the attic wasn't just the start of the problem. This was a warning. Sophie had shown me who she really was. And if I didn't act, more of our family, our home, our history, could disappear. I whispered to myself in the dark, she thinks she can get away with this. But she doesn't know me. And she doesn't know how far I can go to protect what's mine. Little did Sophie know, her helpful renovation had just ignited a fire. And I was already planning how to make her understand the consequences, without putting myself in danger, but with every ounce of cunning I had left. Because some betrayals don't just fade with apologies. Some demand action. After reading Sophie's journal, I couldn't sleep. Not for hours, not for minutes. My mind replayed every careless movement she made in the attic, every crumpled box, every lie she'd told. How could my own daughter, the girl I'd raised, treat our family history like it was trash? I walked through the empty attic, fingers brushing over the bare floorboards. Memories echoed in my head, the laughter of my mother teaching me to sew, the smell of pine from Christmas ornaments, the photographs of my father smiling in the garden. Sophie had thrown them away, or worse, donated them like they were worthless. My chest ached, but deep down, anger burned brighter than grief. I realized something important that night. This wasn't just about the attic. It was about respect, about boundaries, and about teaching Sophie a lesson she wouldn't forget. I couldn't just scold her. That would have been easy, but ineffective. She needed to feel the weight of what she'd done. For the next few days, I watched her. I pretended to let it go, smiled politely, and even complimented her organizational skills. She looked pleased with herself, proud that she thought she had gotten away with it. That's when I knew the moment to act had come. I started planning carefully. I didn't want to humiliate her in public, but I wanted Sophie to understand consequences. She needed a reality check, one that combined truth, subtle shock, and a little poetic justice. Step 1. Documentation. I gathered every shred of proof, photos of the attic before and after the renovation, the crumpled receipts from the thrift store, the journal entries where she admitted her intentions, even her casual bragging about cleaning out mom's junk. Every piece mattered. This wasn't about revenge and anger, this was about strategy. Step 2. Allies. I reached out to my friend Margaret, who had always known me as Helen the meticulous, organized woman. Margaret was a retired teacher, clever, wise, and completely trustworthy. I explained the situation without drama, just facts. By the end of the call, she was on board. Together, we brainstormed how to show Sophie the impact of her actions without breaking the law or exposing me to conflict. Step 3. Emotional leverage. Sophie thrived on appearances. She wanted to look accomplished, in control, grown up in her own eyes. I decided to let her feel competent, even confident, while secretly preparing the reveal that would bring her face to face with the consequences of her choices. I created a plan with multiple layers. First, a casual attic cleaning day, where I'd let her rearrange shelves, subtly planting some missing items in plain sight. Next, a private conversation, staged to make her reflect on what she had done, not me yelling. I wanted guilt, not defiance. And finally, a small, symbolic gesture of restoration, an object or letter that would confront her with the emotional weight of the past she had nearly destroyed. All the while, I had to maintain composure. Sophie was clever, quick to hide her feelings. She needed to think she was winning while I subtly guided her into her own realization. It was psychological chess, and I loved the strategy almost as much as I feared the stakes. At night, I sat with my tea, writing notes, sketching out the attic layout, even drafting dialogue in my head for the moment of confrontation. I reminded myself, this wasn't cruelty. This wasn't spite. This was education. It was a lesson in respect, in memory, in family. But as I planned, a darker fear crept in. What if Sophie reacted badly? What if she lashed out, lied, or tried to destroy even more? I had to be ready, emotionally steady, legally cautious, and morally certain. Finally, after a week of preparation, the plan was ready. I would allow her to think she was still in control, let her feel accomplished in her renovation, and then slowly pull back the curtain to reveal the full scope of her actions. Every discarded box, every donated item, every treasured memory she had thoughtlessly abandoned, all of it would be laid bare, not with anger, but with undeniable truth. And that truth, I knew, would hit her harder than any scolding ever could. That night, I stood in the living room, staring at the staircase to the attic. I whispered to myself, softly but firmly, Sophie has no idea what's coming. And when she realizes it, she'll understand exactly why family history is sacred. The morning of the reveal, the house was quiet, deceptively quiet. Sophie was buzzing with excitement, reorganizing shelves in the attic, humming to herself, completely unaware that her victory was about to collapse. I watched from the doorway, heart pounding with a strange mixture of anger and anticipation. Mom, look at this corner. I reorganized all the ornaments, she called, her voice bright, almost triumphant. I smiled gently, letting her think she had one. That looks nice, Sophie, I said. Inside, though, I was preparing for the first move. Step 1 of my plan, the planted discovery. I had hidden a small envelope in the bottom of one of the attic boxes she hadn't checked. Inside was a note, written in my mother's handwriting, a facsimile I had recreated from old letters, detailing the sentimental value of the attic's contents. The note wasn't accusatory, it simply described memories, love, and the weight of heritage. Sophie found it within minutes. Her face fell as she read. Mom, this was important to you? I nodded, calm and deliberate. More than you realize. Her eyes darted around the attic, seeing boxes she had given away, items she had discarded. A flicker of panic appeared. I didn't think it mattered. I didn't think you'd notice. But step 2 was coming, the receipts. I had arranged for the local thrift store to send digital copies of the donation logs, all tied to Sophie's name. When I presented them, her confident mask cracked completely. You donated everything? I asked softly, letting the silence speak louder than any words. Sophie's hands trembled. I thought I was helping. Step 3, the emotional mirror. I handed her a small box I had retrieved, one that contained a few items she thought were gone forever, a Christmas ornament she loved, my father's old letters, and photographs of Sophie as a child. I placed them in her hands, and her tears started to fall. You see, Sophie, I said carefully, these aren't just objects. They're memories, our family history. Once they're gone, they can't come back. Her voice was barely a whisper. I didn't know. That's when step 4, the final twist, revealed itself. I told her about the backup plan, a small video I had secretly recorded of her moving boxes and laughing about how the mom wouldn't notice. I didn't show her the video immediately. Instead, I described it, the laughter, the donations, the casual disregard. Her face turned pale. You recorded me? I nodded. I wanted you to see yourself the way I see you. Not as my daughter, not as a helper, but as someone who dismissed what matters most. The combination of guilt, shock, and realization hit Sophie harder than any scolding ever could. She sank to the floor, clutching the box of recovered treasures, sobbing quietly. For the next hour, I let her reflect. I didn't yell, I didn't lecture excessively. I let the truth sink in. Every discarded memory, every lost ornament, every donated box, it weighed heavily on her conscience. Then came the final, subtle step. I asked her to help me restore what we could. Together, we sorted through the remaining boxes, documented what could be replaced, and carefully stored what we had saved. She worked silently, eyes downcast, finally beginning to understand the value of respect, family, and history. By the end of the day, Sophie was transformed. She hugged me tightly, whispering apologies between tears. I never understood. I was so selfish. I'm sorry, Mom. I held her close, feeling the mix of relief, vindication, and sorrow. This was not cruel revenge, it was a lesson, a revelation, a moment where understanding replaced ignorance. And then, just as I thought the storm had passed, the last twist emerged. A neighbor, who had seen Sophie carrying bags of boxes to her car, returned some of the discarded items, old ornaments, photographs, even some letters. She handed them to me with a shy smile. I thought these might belong to you, she said. Sophie gasped. Some of it came back? I smiled. Memory has a way of returning if it's cherished enough. And sometimes, it comes with lessons we'll never forget. That evening, we sat together in the attic, organizing what remained. The air was filled not with dust and neglect, but with a renewed sense of family. Sophie finally understood, the weight of memories cannot be measured in space or time, and respect is not optional, it is earned. By the time the sun set over Memphis, the attic felt alive again. Not perfect, not untouched, but restored in a way that mattered far more than neat shelves or empty space. Sophie had learned the hard way. And I had shown her, without violence or anger, only truth and patience, the consequences of disregarding what we hold dear. The days that followed were quiet, almost reflective. The attic, once a battlefield of anger and betrayal, had transformed into a place of learning and reconciliation. Sophie worked diligently, carefully arranging the recovered treasures and documenting the few items we could never get back. I watched her closely, and for the first time since the renovation, I felt a mixture of relief and pride. She was no longer the impulsive, careless girl who thought family memories were disposable. She had finally understood the weight of the past, the significance of every box, every letter, every ornament. One afternoon, a small envelope arrived in the mail. It was from a neighbor who had quietly followed the chaos of our attic renovation. Inside were photographs and trinkets Sophie had thought were gone forever, items she had discarded in haste. She gasped as she opened the envelope, tears forming in her eyes. Mom, they came back? I nodded, smiling softly. Some memories find their way back when they're meant to. And sometimes, they come with a lesson you'll never forget. Sophie turned to me, her voice trembling. I was so selfish. I didn't understand. I didn't see what I was doing. I took her hand, holding it gently. That's the point, Sophie. You've learned. You've felt the weight of what happens when we disregard the past. That's what matters, that you understand and never forget. Over the next few weeks, our relationship slowly rebuilt itself. We spent afternoons going through old photographs, telling stories, laughing at memories I had almost thought were lost. It was a quiet healing, but powerful. The attic became a sanctuary again, filled with stories and the warmth of understanding. And yet, I couldn't help but think of karma in its own quiet way. Sophie's impulsive actions had shown her consequences immediately: loss, guilt, and reflection. The universe had a way of teaching lessons, I realized, without us even asking for it. By the end, the attic wasn't just a space of memories, it was a symbol. A symbol that respect for family, patience, and understanding cannot be ignored. And that sometimes, even mistakes and betrayals can lead to growth, if we let the truth guide us. Sophie learned her lesson, and I learned mine. Forgiveness is powerful, but so is teaching the value of heritage. It wasn't revenge and anger that made the impact, it was patience, strategy, and allowing the truth to speak louder than any scolding ever could. As the sun set over Memphis, I looked around the attic, now filled with carefully restored boxes and cherished memories. A gentle smile crossed my face. Sophie stood beside me, silent but reflective, finally understanding the legacy she was a part of. And I whispered softly to myself, some lessons are hard, but they stay with us forever. What would you do if someone you love destroyed family memories? Comment below and share your story, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more emotional, suspenseful family tales.